Welcome to the OCOM Podcast, Episode 2 for Modern Medical Education, where we gather experts to discuss various topics in modern medical education. And the focus of today's show is actually one of my favorite topics, and this is simulation in medical education. My name is Dr. Robert Hasty. I'm your host for today's show, and we have two amazing guest hosts today with us. The first being Dr. Lila Keeler. Dr. Keeler is an OCOM Assistant Professor of OBGYN, and she's the course director of clinical simulation. Welcome, Dr. Keeler.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
So welcome to the show. How are things going with, I know that you're doing point of care ultrasound, or POCUS as we call it. I know you're doing simulation. How are things going so far?
They're going really well. We're very busy because this is a brand new medical school, their first inaugural class, and myself, first time being a course director of clinical simulation. So there's a lot of planning, a lot of figuring things out, and I'm glad that we have a great team here in place at OCOM to make this happen.
Awesome. And of course, the feedback I've been getting has just been amazing. I know the students love their experience with simulation and ultrasound so far. And speaking about simulation, we have the founding director of simulation for OCOM, Noe Navarro. Welcome, Noe.
Thank you.
Yeah. So how are things going with simulation so far, Noe?
Good. I can second that. It's busy, but it's fun. So far it's with a brand new organization. You're kind of seeing what works best for the organization, and that's what a lot of what simulation is. We're gonna adapt and be able to help build out the department. So thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here, and also thanks to both of you. I know that we just went through two hurricanes. One actually hit us, and one didn't really directly hit us. But of course, all the movement with the courses and everything around it. So really appreciate both of you for that. Of course, one of the things that I know the students are super excited about is the point of care ultrasound, which we mentioned a little bit, and POCUS, I guess, people in the industry. And of course, I remember about 10, 15 years ago, folks said in the future that we wouldn't even carry stethoscopes anymore. We just have, handheld ultrasound machines and no more stethoscopes. And we're getting a little closer to that now. So tell me more about POCUS and what we're doing here.
Yes, the POCUS program here at OCOM is quite innovative, and I do see that it is a trend within medical school education nowadays, and it's a great skill for the students to start learning immediately, especially starting in their first year, and then throughout years 1 and 2, and then fine-tuning their school skills in year 3 and 4. This is something that I myself did not have in medical school education, and I am just enthralled that the medical students get to have this. It is a great tool to understand the physics of how we get our images and the ease of getting this type of information, clinical information, right away. And it is something, as an OBGYN, we're very well versed in ultrasound, and I got that training in residency. And the fact that the students are learning anatomy with ultrasound, they can see the dynamic use of ultrasound, and see how it can better their clinical reasoning and diagnostics in the future. I just think it's a cool way to visualize the human body.
Yeah. I love the fact that, we're doing it for first year medical students, so it's really correlating, anatomy, physiology, clinical medicine, really from the very beginning, which I think is super cool. I wonder how many medical schools are actually doing POCUS, training, even with first year students.
The exact number, to me, I don't know off the top of my head, but it absolutely is a trend nowadays. Early exposure is a big part of being able to help prevent a patient outcomes, improve the patient outcomes. So the sooner you can expose someone to that skill, you're priming them for the future. That way, once they do start using it more often, they already have it in the back of their head. They just got to pick up right where they left off.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I will tell you, I'll have to throw out an acronym, medical education, medicine. I think medicine and the military loves their acronyms, but, we just gave the audience the POCUS acronym, but another acronym I think that we should probably throw out are the OSCEs. You can't go around any modern medical school nowadays without hearing the term OSCEs. And actually, years ago, I met the guy from Canada that coined the term, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but I think it's objective structural clinical exam, right?
That is exactly correct.
Yeah. So tell us, how are we doing? I know we actually just had our first OSCE at OCOM, right? And how'd that go? Or standardized patient encounter?
Correct. So we're preparing for our first OSCE here at OCOM, it is a way for us to do a performance assessment for our students. So our students are learning clinical skills through that course, but we're also teaching them medical humanities, doctor-patient relationship in all their courses, and this is really a good way for them to be exposed again, as Noe had mentioned. Early exposure to patient experience is quite exciting, and I know the students are loving it right now. But it will help them gear up for their clinical rotations, and of course, assuming that role as a physician already has really positively influenced our students.
Mhm. Yeah, would
Mhm.
second that. It's been fun. I will lead with that one.
Yeah.
So a lot of our standardized patients, they have feedback, they have experiences from their own backgrounds that they can also provide not only to the students but to the organization. So it's been fun, and we're looking forward to the first official OSCE.
Oh, great, great.
Mhm.
Now remind me, what's the background of our most of our standardized patients? Are they mostly, you know, retirees, folks from the community that are actors? What makes up most of our standardized patients?
Yeah, actually, so it's quite diverse. We have
Mhm.
there's a specific population. It really depends on where you go. Here in Orlando, there's a big population of people who designate their time for SP work. So they can be designated SPs. They know the craft in and out. They can be retirees. Being here, a benefit at OCOM is that we're close to Disney and Universal. So you have a lot of paid professional actors that know how to act as well. So quite there's a big pool of diversity when it comes to the SPs. Mm.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, OBGYN, obviously we'll do our sensitive exams. I think that's second year, probably was it second semester, second year,
Yes.
something like that, and which includes the public exams and the rectal exams. And so my understanding, we're going to outsource that to a company called Clinical Skills USA, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
CSUSA.
Yeah, which I think is always amazing that, and my understanding is there's 2 companies out there that's all they do is just to provide sensitive exams for, medical schools and other health
Mhm.
professional schools,
Yeah.
only in America that there's a business behind that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, great. Yeah, there was and, you were talking about, empathy and,
Mhm.
standardized patient encounters and those type of things. There's Tony Orsini that, does the whole thing on breaking bad news, and which I think it was just incredible. And so I went over one day and he was actually training OBGYN residents who are actually doing OSCEs on OBGYN
Mm.
residents over at one of the local hospitals here. And the encounter they actually had to um, and I think it was trisomy 18 is Edward syndrome or whatever,
Mhm.
and they had to break that news to pregnant, simulated pregnant woman,
Mhm.
and she really looked pregnant. He couldn't even tell,
Mhm.
that she wasn't pregnant, and then afterwards, the resident would have to, tell the patient the bad news, and then in a safe space afterwards, they would watch the video and go over all those things. So you had somebody that had a tragic thing with one of their children, and some expert educators in the room. And so we sat down, watched the video of the resident, introducing the bad news, and being able to give feedback, to the resident right there after they had gone through it. And I remember one encounter, all the subtle little things that you could never do previously, like the fact that the resident, when she said that the patient had or the baby had trisomy 18, uh, she actually did a head tilt, which is a sign of empathy,
Mm.
and she didn't even know she was doing it, but that's a natural body language for empathy, and to be able to train that, that is an empathetic sign.
Mhm.
She did a inflection at the end of each word, and that's actually shown to be non-empathetic. And if she would have just flattened her tone a little bit, that you know typically when you're empathetic, you would flatten your voice, and the other things about the body language, and she also compared it to Down syndrome or trisomy 21, which is very different, right? With the
Mhm.
trisomy 18, I think the baby
It's
universally
fatal.
dies, right?
Mhm.
Fatal, as opposed to trisomy 21, which a lot of times long productive
Mhm.
lives, and that was probably not the most empathetic comparison because it's not really truthful, for the
Mhm.
patient and stuff like that. So I was, to me, that was a moment that really opened my eyes of all the things that we can be doing in modern OSCEs and standardized
Mhm.
patient
Mhm.
encounters and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So,
Well, we actually had a very good example of that, Dean Hasty. We had our second SP encounter, standardized patient encounter that we just finished up on. And it was a straight, simple forward case of streptococcal pharyngitis. But it was in the history, we had that the patient's or the SP's mother had died 2 years prior from breast cancer.
Mhm.
That was part of the history taking. And our students were practicing taking a history from a patient. And what was interesting is that the actors were fantastic. A lot of them, or most of them, I would say, in acted that they were very sad, still withdrawn, very upset. Some of them were crying in the visit with the students, and that was something the students, we didn't prepare them for beforehand, and we wanted to see how would they react to a patient in front of them that was visibly upset. And so after each session, a group of students will do a debriefing after the encounter. And that was one of our questions we asked. How did you respond to your SP when they told you that their mother had passed away?
Mhm.
And it was quite extraordinary to see their response to that. And they helped each other through it, meaning that some people were saying, I didn't feel comfortable, I didn't know what to do, and then their classmate would speak up, well, this is what I did. I said, I'm sorry for your loss. And, they would kind of coach each other through it, which was fantastic. And then us as the facilitators or the instructors, we could watch them interact during that section. And we saw a lot of people, a lot of our students, they're just such great human beings already to start with. Um, Really show their empathy, give the SP a Kleenex, really try to comfort them, which is something um, we didn't quite have lessons on quite yet, but this was something we touched on after, and they all thought that was very valuable to get that in their
Mhm.
SP. So it was pretty cool to
I would
see.
agree, and I
Yeah.
think that's the beautiful thing of simulation is that ultimately, when you're in the moment, and there might be an outcome. With simulation, you can quite extensively break that entire encounter down piece by piece by
Mhm.
piece and walk them through what ultimately would make them good physicians, well,
Mhm.
especially here in the Central Florida community.
Mhm.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was
Now,
beautiful.
we don't currently do this at OCOM, but I know in Canada, and I think this started about 15 years ago or maybe 20 years ago, they do OSCEs for interviews for medical school, and they call them MMIs. I think mini,
Many medical interviews, mixed mode interviews.
right, right,
Mhm.
yeah,
Mm.
and which is basically an OSCE of them going through different
Yeah.
cases. And I remember when they originally introduced this to me, they said, one scenario, and I guess all these schools have different scenarios, but one of them, like you were sitting on an airplane next to a person that was having a panic attack,
Mm.
and they
Oh,
would watch, how you would interact.
interesting.
And another one was that you were sitting in a committee with two other, standardized
Mhm.
actors or whatever they call them. And those two would, okay, well, we have a scholarship and we got to figure out which students to give it to. And they'd
Mhm.
have a list of students, and then you'd have to, kind of reason through the ethics about
Yeah.
that and everything.
Yeah.
I always thought that was interesting, but I think, one of the things, a lot of students start off with high empathy into medical
Mhm.
school, and but you know there's also some of that you can actually train
Mhm.
too. It's
Mhm.
called functional empathy. So I'm always kind of interested with that. Now I have noticed that the Canadian medical schools are, I think almost most of them or a lot of them are still doing the MMIs. I know in the United States, not. I know a couple medical schools try to do the MMIs, and I'm not sure if they're all doing them anymore because of, I think sometimes the feedback isn't good, and I'm not sure if they got the outcomes that they wanted. So, but I always think
Mhm.
I think it's an interesting
It's
concept.
very
Yeah.
interesting, and it translates over not into other areas too. I know
Mhm.
law schools that have standardized patients. I know quite a few other programs that it's the mode of simulation that could just be applied everywhere. Right?
Mhm. Yep. And that's something we stress to our students and to the SPs. This is a safe environment that we're creating to learn from. Especially the students, they're first year medical students. They're already having so much information that they're trying to digest. And, when it comes to, again, assuming that role as a physician already, it helps motivate them too and says, okay, yeah, I really need to work on doing this. I really need to work on organizing my thoughts and my history taking. I really need to work on my documentation already. They're already looking at their documentation to make sure that they can, again, be efficient and, a well-rounded physician.
Now, we haven't talked about one aspect of simulation, which is the high fidelity simulation,
Hmm.
and which are the mannequins, and of course, we have a beautiful high fidelity simulation lab here at OCOM. I think the human patient simulator itself costs $250,000 and has live gases, and of course, we have Dr. Keeler's favorite, which is Lucina.
Lucina. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, amazing, amazing the technology. I'm floored every time we walk in there how far simulation has come. And the fact that OCOM has invested in this type of simulation lab is speaks that they are here to train physicians in a safe manner to make sure that we're able to again act accordingly or how we should be in high stress situations, which again, back when I was trained, we didn't have that. We didn't have a simulation. We might have done it in residency, but this is something that the students here will be able to take part in, and it'll be really important for them.
Yeah, when I was a medical student, we just had like Annie, like the CPR
Yes.
doll. And,
Yep.
yeah, they're definitely not Annie anymore.
I still love them. I still love them.
Yeah, and it is pretty cool. I mean, the rooms do have, you have the heart sounds. The
Mhm.
mannequins, they breathe, they blink, they vomit, they talk. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I was actually in a simulation center down at Naples at NCH Hospital, and
Mm,
they actually that day they were doing C. diff or Clostridium
okay.
difficile thing, and they actually had simulated feces that
Mhm.
they had made, and they just sprayed some of that fecal spray in the room, and oh man,
It was
it was
terrible. It's
terrible. Yeah.
terrible.
That's pungent. Yep.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
it's pretty incredible.
yeah,
So
no, I'm floored
yeah,
with what OCOM has been able to kind of invest in, built in
Mhm.
so far as well. So, from my experience, the simulation it can go from a low fidelity task trainer to what we have
Mhm.
here at OCOM. So, already having that equipment, setting yourself up for all future students and current students to get really ready for the real world.
yeah.
Mhm. Yep.
Well, I'm totally convinced that you can train a safer physician through high fidelity simulation, but and there is some literature behind that, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I remember we had one scenario at one of the medical schools I was at, and the student was or the patient was hypoglycemic, and they were
Okay.
like, doctor, what do you want to do? And the medical student said, give me some dextrose, D50 or whatever, AMPA
Hmm.
D50, and the standardized patient nurse, handed some insulin to him, and it clearly said insulin, right,
Hmm.
which shouldn't be given to a hypoglycemic
Mhm.
patient, and then the medical student pushed it, into the patient,
Hmm.
like, and then all of a sudden the nurse said, "What'd you do? You just gave insulin to a patient
Yep.
with
Oh man.
hypoglycemia," and
Oh
then
man.
you have to go through like, the whole thing about, and you talk about debrief
Yeah.
afterwards,
Yeah.
you know, and then obviously, and the great thing about the mannequins, right? Even if you do make an error on the mannequin,
Mhm.
no
Hmm.
one can't kill anybody,
Hmm.
and rather have those mistakes on the high fidelity mannequins before they get out to the
Mhm.
world.
Absolutely. I've always thought of it. It was a little funny to me having a designated place for people to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Now, all this money, all this work, all this organization, that's what this is for. So, giving somebody that opportunity time and time again improves patient outcomes, and that's what simulation is all
Mhm.
about.
Yep.
Mm.
100%. I mean, you get in those high stress environments out there in the real world in the hospital, and sometimes your mind will just go blank. But it all goes back to your training, being an OBGYN in those high stressed situations. We were trained so well that your mind just kind of goes to where your training is, and all that noise kind of just goes away and you just know what to do. This is what we're trying to simulate here at OCOM is we're trying to get through those situations like, okay, what are you going to do when this actually happens, and this is we're recreating that, and it's such a great idea.
Now, you mentioned about, the high stress environment of, the real world, you get
Hmm.
a patient crashing, code or
Hmm.
whatever. When I first started medical education like 20 years ago, I know that we actually tried to avoid fog of war training. Well, I guess what they call fog of war training, and trying to have lower stress environments for training. But I think now that the mind shift is that we should put people into real world scenarios as much as possible,
Hmm.
and and have things, have the bleeping going off, the blink, the
Mhm.
sounds going off, the alarms going off, having,
Hmm.
the person, have a little stress in that environment, just like
Mhm.
you would in the real world. Or if you have the code, then you have a simulated patient coming in, being the family member,
Mhm.
and then how do you deal with a family member in a code and
Exactly.
stuff like that.
Absolutely.
So very, very different, mindset, try to make it as real world as possible. I mean,
Mhm.
I know some medical schools, they actually have separate entrances for their standardized patients to try to
Mhm.
make this as real as possible. It's
Mhm.
it's, it's incredible, how things have come. So
Absolutely. I
yeah,
forget the term in psychology that it is, but when you expose something little by little and add on a little layer of something else each time, um, yeah, it's amazing the simulation that's kind of what you do. You're protecting patients at the very end of the day with everything that you're training, but you're also protecting the
Mhm.
students and exposing them little by little. That way, they know what they signed up for.
Mhm.
mm, almost like a progressive disclosure. Yeah. So, well, let me ask you this: Dr. Keeler, you mentioned, the noting, the notes that the students had to
Mhm.
write. We
Mhm.
call it SOAP notes in medicine. That stands for subjective, objective, assessment, and plan notes.
Mhm.
But kind of the standard, notes that folks do. And I remember when early on in my career, I had to do so many SOAP notes, and that was like I had to grade them as a faculty member, and it was probably one of my least favorite jobs. In medical education is grading the SOAP notes. Although the former students were probably, asking why I tortured them so much on the SOAP notes. Um, but nowadays I know that we're starting to use some tools like AI and stuff to grade it. So
Mhm.
you want to talk about that a little bit? Huh?
Yeah, sure. So as far as soap notes, we are teaching our students how to create a soap note, how to correctly and efficiently and to document their findings and their history taking. Um, you know, and how we're teaching it is we're teaching it from the bare bones up. So yes, we have all this technology at our fingertips, but really training the physicians, we have to start with how are we going to think about doing this without the technology. And so right now, our students are probably not liking me so much because I'm making them type out everything. I'm not having them handwrite things like I we did, but we're having them type everything out. No smart phrases, no dictation, nothing at this point to write their soap notes. And, we've got 97 students here that are going through three or more events a semester. It's a lot of soap notes to get through. And so, with the age of AI, we have tinkered with can we have an AI grade their soap notes if we're given the proper rubric? And so, right now, we're in the middle of testing this out and piloting it out, where we're having soap notes graded by faculty members. Which are physicians. Most of them are board certified physicians that are using our rubric to grade the soap notes, but we're also um, grading them a second time with AI, and we're comparing and contrasting at this point, and we'll see, what's going to be better for our students in the long run as far as grading.
Oh, any anecdotal feedback so far? Or,
You
yeah.
know, I was a little bit leery about AI. I mean, maybe everyone was or is. But it's pretty spot on. I would grade mine, run it through the AI, and it was maybe 1 or 2 points shy of what I graded, and so right now it's looking pretty good. But I haven't done a big swath of it yet to really say, okay, yeah, we should do this all this way. I do think there is still some utility for the physicians or board certified physicians to take a look and see so we can give some constructive feedback. Though AI, you can ask it to give it feedback or for like a constructive feedback. How can this note be better? And it's quite interesting because it is also spot on as well. So I think we still have to kind of play around with it to see what we're comfortable with here at OCOM to actually use.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you my anecdotal thing is I played around with Gemini and I uploaded.
Mm,
I actually had an old student note, from years ago. I actually had a few SOAP notes I had in my hard drive on my computer, and so I uploaded those. And then I had my
mhm.
comparison grade, and actually there were
Yeah.
don't tell the former student this, but I missed there were things that the Gemini picked up that I'd
Mm,
missed on my
Yeah.
first
mhm.
review. So actually, I guess it was good for the student, right?
Yeah,
They got a
yeah.
little or maybe it was bad. It depends on how you look at it. So,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
yeah, as a former person that graded a lot of soap notes, I would have gladly welcomed, if this
Oh, yeah.
technology does take off. And I know you guys are doing some research on this, so that'd be kind of cool to
Mhm.
see. see
Yeah.
what the outcomes
Yeah.
are.
Well,
So,
building out the department and building out the program, it's in my operationalizing this course, it does kind of go in between. All right, let's make things more efficient as well, and that's one way that AI can be able to help us, even from any business model out there. Just make things a little more efficient. Now we want to make sure the efficient is also correct. So that's a lot of the work that we're doing right now.
Mhm.
excellent, excellent. Well, talking about technology, what are some trends right now that you all are seeing in simulation? I know I've played around with some the VR a little bit. I played around with some immersive rooms,
Mhm.
some of those things. But talk about
I
that.
personally, I've seen standardized patients not only be physical but virtual, as well as put them in a hologram. Now we're gonna have AI kind of incorporated with that hologram to where you have a standardized patient at your fingertips. Here's your case. This is their affect. This is the basics of the information. We're gonna program that, and even up to how the patient looks. You can have a hologram of an entire standardized patient encounter. You can put in there 20 minutes for an encounter, 15-minute encounter. Um, be hard on the students or be a little more softer with the information that you're electing when you answer it. I'm seeing that trend a little more often. I think it's awesome.
That's great. That's insane. But that's all. I mean, again, a testament of technology. It's almost like sky's the limit. I don't know.
Mhm.
That would be great because you can have complete control, right, over what kind of scenario you are putting in front of students. It will be standardized, meaning it'll be the same
Mhm.
across the board. And so, I mean, will it? But you lose that tactile feel, you lose the person to person feel. So I mean, it's gonna like everything else, kind of go in waves, I would think. But
Mhm.
hey, we'll see how it goes.
Although I will tell you that I did one time demo out some of these haptic gloves, so like you
Okay.
can kind of feel the, like
Oh,
you,
sure,
you
like
thought
the
you were
haptic
touching it.
feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I mean, the technology wasn't like, and this was a few years ago. I tested this out, but it wasn't quite there yet. But it's coming.
yeah,
It's
It's
coming.
right there.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
well, it's one of those things. You also never want to be like the first or last to like adopt a new technology. It's like these immersive rooms.
Yeah.
So I remember the first time I saw the immersive room, I was like so fascinated a few years
Oh
ago,
yeah.
and they would have like you'd walk into the room, about the size of this room, and they would have these projectors on the these white walls and stuff like that, and the ambulance is there, and you're in the trauma bay and all this other stuff, and and it looked so awesome. And then you would have to answer questions by
Mhm.
touching the wall and
Mhm.
everything. But man, every single time I've demoed one, and I was just at a site probably about 8 months ago or so that had one. They had to reboot the thing and all
Mhm,
this other stuff, and
mhm.
I'm not quite sure if the technology is quite there yet. So
Well, the idea is there, which is I
Yeah,
love
that's
the
all it
idea.
takes.
yeah,
All it
yeah.
takes is an idea.
Yeah, or it's like VR, right? VR is like the
Mhm.
the hottest thing right now, and everybody's like, and actually, I'll admit I have one of the Apple Vision Pros, and I love the thing. It's
Mhm.
great, but I will tell you, I was at one medical school that was using a lot of VR, and I went on the tour, and they showed it off and everything, and I started talking to the medical student. You ever use this thing? It's really just for tours.
Oh.
Mhm.
But, because it was like, it's kind of cool to show off and
Yeah.
Yeah.
everything, but it wasn't really, by the time you put things on and get to where you need it, it just wasn't that
Mm.
efficient learning. Although, I mean, I think that technology may take off too.
Mhm.
So anyway, well, we'll tell you what. I know that we have to wrap up. Anything else that you guys want to discuss in terms of simulation, OSCE, standardized patients, POCUS?
Uh, I personally, with simulation, is ultimately to improve patient outcomes, and that's a big thing that stand for. So I love the idea of simulation
Mhm.
in the new age of emerging technology. Simulation is also an emerging idea. So don't be surprised if you have a whole hospital at your fingertips that you can just turn on and off from an hologram. So that's,
Yeah.
personally, I love it, and so I just want to thank you for your time as well.
Yeah. No, and I echo that too. I think it's been such a blessing to be part of OCOM in the first place, but then again to be part of the clinical simulation department and doing the course. I love seeing this firsthand. I love it's so much fun. We're having so much fun with it, and the students are, from what I hear, are really really liking it. Um, and I agree. I think the more that we can train our students before they graduate and as they are and still ongoing, the better for everyone all around. I think it's fantastic that we're already doing it from the first year of medical school because I think it will really kind of solidify why they're here.
Excellent.
Mhm.
Well, great. It was amazing having both of you on the podcast today. Thank you so much. And until next time, this is the OCOM Podcast, Modern Medical Education. And thanks for joining us today.